Welcome back to our continuation of part 1 on our series, The Days of Noah. Specifically, we've been talking about sons of God in the reference in the Genesis 6 verse about the sons of God coming down to earth and marrying the daughters of men. And we've been talking about that concept, sons of God, and who else is called a son of God. And we did identify that Adam is called a son of God, that Yeshua is called a son of God, and that even we are called sons of God. And we're right in the middle of that concept at what point are we called sons of God? So we talked about that, and we're going to go continue in that line by looking at John 1:12. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children or sons of God. Children born not of blood, nor of the desire or will of man, but born of God. Here it says we have been given the right to become children of God or sons of God, but we aren't quite there yet. When we say we're born again, I think a lot of people think that this rebirth occurs the minute we emerge out of the baptismal waters. But what Paul seems to be pointing to is a future time when our bodies are actually reborn in an incorruptible state so that we can live forever with God. All humans are originally born as sons of men, human men. Some of us are reborn as sons of God through the salvific work of Yeshua on the cross. But it's a process, not a done deal. When we recite the sinner's prayer and get dunked in the water, we talk about that a lot. We talk about process, right, Gary? So our second birth is a birth that God specifically brings about without the intercession of man. This is what makes us sons of God. Adam was not begotten or born or procreated by the will of man, but by the will of God. Yeshua is not begotten by man, but by God. And at our resurrection, we will not be begotten by man's will, but by God's will.
Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, right, Cassie?
Right.
So if Son of God designates the way in which someone is begotten through God's will, not man's will, apparently these B'nai Elohim were begotten by God's will for God's purposes. We don't read about their mothers or fathers. This phrase, son of God, means that someone is brought about directly by God's will. Many people think that the term Son of God is uniquely applied to Jesus, indicating his special position and role as the Messiah, or even the condition of him being God himself. But as we have shown, this phrase is not unique to him. Ironically, the term Son of Man, which also shows up in the Matthew 24 verses about the days of Noah, and is used by Yeshua to describe himself, is much more exclusive than the unique and indicative of his one-of-a-kind messianic role. We will be discussing the term Son of Man in another podcast, though. That's too much for today.
It is too much. So we have these B'nai Elohim who existed in a heavenly realm, and at some point they decided to leave the heavenly realm and come to earth and mate with human women. We're going to see that this was a big no-no. Where do we learn about this copulation between B'nai Elohim of heaven and the daughters of men was an evil act? In the book of Jude, for one. In the book of Jude, these particular B'nai Elohim are also simply called angels. Remember, the term angel in Hebrew is not a designation of a type of being as much as a designation of a purpose. An angel in Hebrew, malach, is a messenger. In reference to the story of the Nephilim in Genesis 6, the book of Jude says this, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, he is kept in eternal bonds under darkness for the judgment of the great day, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they, in the same way as these, indulged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. That's Jude 6:7.
Every day we pass by untold stories waiting to be heard. Those we care about may be struggling and feeling all alone. It's easy to turn away and ignore the pain, yet true friendship calls us to stand together in life's toughest moments. Sometimes the smallest gesture has the power to make the biggest difference. Be the friend who cares. Rise to the call for help. Stand by their side. Today, it's the Jewish people who need our support. They seek friends who will walk with them. Ezra International, a true friend to the Jewish people in need. Give to EzraInternational.org and become a friend to the Jewish people today.
So now we've brought the question of how can angels have sex with human women and produce children?
Now it's getting juicy.
Now we're getting into the important stuff. Most of us think of angels as spiritual beings, or we think of them as chubby, naked little babies. Well, just an interesting side note. There are no baby-like angels in all of Scripture. This chubby baby figure was known in Renaissance art as puto, an Italian vernacular derived for boy, but its origins go much further back than the Greco-Roman world. The conception of the puto reaches back into art, into the classical world, where winged infants were physical manifestations of invisible essence or spirits. These spirits were believed to influence human lives. The spirits of love were Eros, or Cupid, and Venus. In celebrations of Dionysus, or Bacchus, baby angels represented fertility, abundance, and the fruit of life were often depicted in wild revelry.
Wow. Just goes to show that we often have such erroneous ideas in our head of things that are talked about in the Bible. These angels that are being described in Jude are not these little bitty cherubim,
Right.
naked little angel babies.
It comes from the historic artwork, and we just get that image in our head, and it continues on.
And I think that's why we're doing what we're doing is we got to get rid of, we called them before, these low resolution, erroneous neurophysiological mechanisms, right? Okay,
Don't we love that?
We love that phrase.
Yeah.
What it means is it's wrong.
Right.
Okay. So we're trying to get rid of these wrong ideas.
Right.
And that would even apply to what are angels?
Right. Right.
All we can go with is what we should go with is what's in the Bible, first off, and recognize that if we've got something put in there later during the Renaissance, that maybe isn't it.
And it goes from Renaissance period all the way to modern movies,
Exactly.
what an angel look like or do.
The big wings and all of that. Right. So now let's get back to spirit beings. Many people wonder how spirit beings can have sex with humans. One theory is that these angels, as spirit beings, had to take possession of human male bodies and were thus enabled to do the deed. But nothing in Scripture suggests that that happened. In fact, when we read about angels in the Bible, they're often eating and drinking, things that people with bodies do. In Sodom, the men wanted to have sex with the angels who showed up in their city gate. Where did they get that idea? Granted, it was homosexual sex, but still, could it have been from the story of the Nephilim? The writer of Hebrews reminds us, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. Mary saw two angels in Yeshua's tomb, but she spoke to them as if they were just two men, apparently unaware that they were angels. We are told that the Apostle John fell down at the feet of an angel to worship him, but the angel recoiled, saying, "You must not do that. I'm a fellow servant with you and your brothers who hold to the testimony of Jesus. Worship God." So once again, Gary, let's get this idea from the Bible of who angels are, what they do,
Yeah.
What they don't do,
What they don't
you
do,
know,
and what they
what they're
look
not supposed to do.
and what they look like. I mean, if
Yeah.
they could be mistaken for a human being, then that's a bit of a different picture than what we're.
And that explains this idea going back to Genesis, why these women would marry them.
Sure.
I mean, they're not going to marry little babies, right? Okay.
Right.
They're not going to marry that. And maybe not that concept with the big wings and stuff like that. They look like men.
Yeah.
You know?
It obviously had the anatomy of a man.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, and let's get real here.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so I mean, so yeah, I think our concepts are wrong.
Right.
You know, the other thing about these B'nai Elohim is that they seem to have been around since before the creation of the earth. In Job chapter 38, we read this: "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have an understanding, who determined its measurement? Surely you know, or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, shouted for joy?"
There we go again.
They're there.
There's more information about B'nai Elohim. You have to dig through the Bible to get it.
Yes, you do.
But,
Yes, you do.
but it's there. It's there. So now, interestingly, we humans tend to be very human-centered, thinking that everything started with us, that there was no story before the earth was made for us, but perhaps there was a story that started before us. Perhaps these B'nai Elohim were before us, and they had their own story, even prior to when their story started to intersect with our story during the days of Noah. Maybe their story is not over, just as ours is not over. And perhaps Yeshua's cryptic message, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man, can be decoded. And perhaps the story of the B'nai Elohim will help us decode Yeshua's statement. Perhaps these B'nai Elohim will be part of the story in the days leading up to the coming of the Son of Man. When we come back, we'll turn to an extra biblical account of the B'nai Elohim found in the book of Enoch, a book widely known and referenced in the days of Yeshua, even referenced in our Bible directly. Can the book of Enoch help us decipher more about this strange short story in Genesis 6 about the sons of God, the daughters of men, and the Nephilim, a story that just may impact us more than we had ever imagined?
If you are a Christian, then there is no question that you owe a great debt to the Jewish people. Unto them were entrusted the oracles of God. What does that mean? It means, if not for the faithfulness of the Jewish people, we would not have this. And therefore you would not know your God, and you would not know his Son.
Israel and the Jewish people are under attack right now, and we owe them everything. The least that we can do is support them in their hour of need. So please go to EzraInternational.org and give to the Emergency Relief Fund, and your dollars will be used to help displaced and traumatized Jewish people throughout the land.
And remember, if you do nothing, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jewish people from another place. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Please go to EzraInternational.org and give your best gift today.
Welcome back. We're doing a deep dive into the days of Noah because Yeshua said that when he returns, it will be as if it was in the days of Noah. So we have to understand what was happening in the days of Noah. We read in Genesis chapter 6 about the great wickedness that was upon the face of the earth during the days of Noah. The Lord saw the people were very wicked, that all the imaginings of their hearts were always evil only. The Lord regretted that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved his heart. The Lord said, I will wipe out humankind, whom I have created from the whole earth. But Noah found grace in the sight of the Lord. Why was there such great wickedness? Earlier, we backed up to the beginning of the Genesis 6 and read the strange short story about the sons of God and the daughters of men and the giants, the Nephilim, they produced. We focused on the identity of these sons of God, or in Hebrew, B'nai Elohim, identifying them as some type of heavenly being that existed long before the creation of earth. They make up what the Bible calls the divine council, and they're sometimes referred to as angels in the Bible. Now, we're going to delve into the actual story of the interaction between these heavenly beings and humans and the devastating impact this interaction caused upon the face of the earth. So devastating that God had to destroy the entire earth with a flood. Gary, I'd like to kind of go back or start off, I don't know how you want to say it, with some of these ideas about these myths and legends that we've talked about before. The idea that all these ancient cultures had these myths or stories that involved gods, right?
Right.
And often interacting with human beings in some way.
Absolutely.
And I used to not believe
Right.
that
They
these
were,
true,
sure.
right?
Well, I think, we're around the same age. We all grew up, at least, I don't know if they do it in school now, but we grew up learning Greek and Roman mythology, right?
Absolutely.
And of course, there were movies made, Hercules movies and things like
Right.
that. And yeah, we thought they were all fictional. But now, as we start looking at these things, a little deeper,
Yes.
you see that there may be some real depth to
Exactly.
where these stories came from. In fact, my associate, Dr. Rick Watch, is doing a whole series on this idea of ancient myths and legends, and it's going to be available on Ezra International Global TV Network probably next year. But yeah, and in other venues and formats. But this is a very fascinating topic when you think about how all cultures had a form of these stories.
Yeah, I just never thought of it that way before, that if everybody has a form of this story,
Mhm.
this story may go back and have
Sure.
some reality to it.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of interesting. And the other interesting or fascinating thing that I find is that in all these stories of the gods, there's the concept of them commingling with humans, having sex with humans, and thus creating some type of demigod. And like you said, the Hercules stories and all of those myths, they're all very similar. And according to Timothy Alberino, who's the author of the book that I mentioned earlier, Birthright, The Coming Post-Human Apocalypse, and the Usurpation of Adam's Dominion on Planet Earth. I'm going to get
Quite
that
a title. It is quite a title.
According to Alberino's book, this is what he said about that. He goes, the general narrative relating to the commingling of God and man, the subsequent procreation of hybrid offspring, and the sudden obliteration of a ruinous cataclysm can be detected in the written records and oral traditions of every primary culture on Earth. Hundreds of pages could be devoted to cataloging the parallels in the pre-flood legends of Mesopotamia, Egyptian, Greco-Roman, Mesoamerican, Andean, Polynesian, and Asian peoples, among many others. It is logical to conclude that their narratives originated from the same source. Fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's ubiquitous, as he would often say in his podcast. It's throughout the entire world, and often in a court case, we look for witnesses, and the more the better, right? We all know that each witness never tells the exact same story as the other witnesses. Everyone tells the story based on his or her own point of view. But nonetheless, it is still possible to piece together a fairly accurate account. Now, the Bible requires 2 witnesses. In this case, we have many more. You might ask, if this story is true and the actions of these heavenly beings caused such a cataclysm, a worldwide flood in this case, and Jesus warned us that the situation will be the same on his return, why does the Bible only devote about 4 sentences to it? I mean,
4 sentences, if this is such a big deal. But I think there's an answer to that.
I think so. I know the answer.
I think the answer to that is simply that everybody knew this story. This was a worldwide story that everybody knew.
Exactly.
Why do you have to go back in detail? Now, one thing that Alberino said that I found particularly interesting is that in all the various cultures across time, this age of the gods on earth was described as a type of golden age, a desirable time, a highlight of civilization, and many looked forward to the return of this golden age. The only exception to this way of looking at this age is the Hebrew version of the story. The Bible clearly connects this forbidden mingling between the gods and man as a very bad thing. The author of the book of Jude describes this intermingling as gross immorality, for which the punishment was eternal fire. Fascinating to me.
It is because mankind sees this as such a time of
greatness. Think about that.
And yet God looks at it with such disdain that he would actually destroy the earth. This should really give us pause when it comes to Yeshua's words about the days will be like the days of Noah. It really should. And when we see the perversion and the evil in the world,
and the sexual immorality,
the cheapness of human life,
right? Strange flesh, as they talk about that. Strange flesh.
It should really concern us.
Exactly. Yeah. I've been reading some of the extra canonical books lately, books not deemed to be part of the biblical canon. Now, just because a particular piece of writing did not make it in the canon of the Bible doesn't mean that it doesn't contain truth or that it wasn't widely circulated and referenced by Jews or Christians in earlier times. These writings are sometimes called deuterocanonical, meaning a second canon. Now, these are certain books and passages considered to be canonical books of the Old Testament by the Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, and the Church of the East. In contrast, modern Rabbinic Judaism and Protestants sometimes call these books apocrypha or questionable. They both mean the same thing: writings outside the canon of accepted books of the Bible. Now, one set of writings are the Book of Enoch, actually the books of Enoch, First Enoch, Second Enoch, and Third Enoch. The one we want to look at in depth today is First Enoch. It's called the Ethiopic Enoch, simply because it's part of the canon of the Ethiopian Church.
And the Ethiopian Bible is the sacred scripture of one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world. It is written in an ancient Semitic language no longer spoken, but is still used in liturgy. The Ethiopian Bible is notable for its size and content. It contains more books than the Protestant Bible, and it includes texts that are not found in the canons of the Roman Catholicism or in Eastern Orthodoxy. Ethiopia's early exposure to Christianity traditionally traced back to the Ethiopian eunuch's conversion in Acts chapter 8, verse 26 through 39, and allowed for the preservation of certain Jewish Christian texts and were not widely accepted elsewhere. Based on available scholarly sources, a total of 11 Aramaic manuscripts of parts of the First Enoch were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran Cave number 4. Judging by the number of copies found, we can conclude that the Book of Enoch was widely read during the Second Temple period.
It's interesting to note that the Book of Enoch is directly quoted by the author of the Book of Jude. In Jude 1, 14 through 15, says, "It was also about these men that Enoch, in the 7th generation from Adam, prophesied, saying," and this is where it goes straight to Enoch, "Behold, the Lord came with many thousands of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all and to convict all of the ungodly of their ungodly deeds, which they have done in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." This is directly quoted from First Enoch, Enoch 1:9. So I think it's important to recognize that that the author of Jude, which is a part of our canon,
Right.
was quoting directly from something that was not part of our canon at this point. It's not,
Right.
but he must have thought it valuable and worthwhile, and he must have been very familiar.
Very familiar, which goes back to something we said earlier on in our podcast series about the context that the people of the first century or that period of time that we put together these books were very familiar with these stories. It's not, we talked about having to uncover all through the debris, the shovel, whereas Jude did not have to do that.
That's right.
This was part of his zeitgeist. This was something that everybody in his audience, who he was writing to, would be very familiar with.
That's right. Yeah. In our earlier we were talking in depth about the B'nai Elohim, or the sons of God, who they actually were, or I guess actually are, right?
Yeah, scary.
The Bible uses the term angels to describe them sometimes. And sure, they're a type of supernatural being that serves God in the spiritual council of some sort. So go back and make sure you've got all of that, okay, folks, so that you kind of understand that. But understand that here, Jude is referring to them as angels. It's the same story.
Well, Kathy, absolutely. And we're once again out of time. This series is going to take a lot more details, so we're going to have to pick it up next time. Thank you for joining us. God bless you.